G'day guys, and welcome to episode 37 of the Bradley J. Driver Experience. Today's guest is, well, an incredible woman. She has an amazing story, and we're here today after the recent release of her memoir. What I love about this lady is her story is very powerful. It will change lives, and we're all about the power of conversation here on The Experience. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Carmen Greentree. How are you, Carmen?
I'm good, thanks, Bradley. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And I appreciate you coming through today. It's funny, I was sitting there with a good friend of mine, James, who works for Channel 9, and he was telling me, we always talk about his work, and he told me about this incredible woman that he just met and written a piece on, and he sent me the piece, and he said, I think she would be an amazing guest for your podcast. And I read your story, and I was just, I'd never heard anything like it. I'd never met anyone in my lifetime that had been through a similar situation or a similar experience. And for me, the first thing that stood out was courage to share and to allow other people into that story. And as we sort of spoke about just before we hit record here today, you know, being vulnerable and sharing allows other people to feel comfortable in that space and sharing with you. So I'm looking forward to diving into the story today and allowing our listeners to hear. So like I said, thank you so much for coming on, and we'd love to hear about where it all began.
Thank you, Bradley. And when you shared just before we hit record that you really feel drawn to making sure that you're very particular about the types of people that you have on the show and you want them to be good people, I felt so blessed that you would have chosen someone like me. So it's my honour.
No, it's my honour. It's my absolute pleasure. I might get you to move a little bit closer to the mic too. But I'm really interested to hear because, you know, on The Experience, we love Wollongong locals. It's amazing to keep sharing amazing local stories. And when I heard that you're from Wollongong, I was even more surprised that I hadn't heard, because it's it's big here, but it's such a small town. You kind of know everyone, you get to know everyone. But talk to me about your life growing up. Did you grow up in this area?
Well, I grew up in Shellharbour. Went to Shellharbour Public School when I was when I was a kid, and then I went to Smith Hill High School here in Wollongong. And then I finished the last couple of years at Fig Tree High School.
Okay.
So
very local your whole life.
Very local, yeah. And then after that, I moved straight away. As soon as high school was finished, I was up into the Gold Coast.
Okay.
Because the Gold Coast is where all the professional surfers live. Not all of them, but a lot of them live there, and a lot of the trainers and a lot of the media that sort of revolve around that kind of surfing community. And because I wanted to be world champion surfer, I went and moved up there for about 5 years.
Talk to me about that dream, the dream of, because we were just talking before, I had those athletic dreams as a kid as well. And I think most Aussie kids do. We grow up around physical activity and sport, that we love that idea of doing that for a living. Talk to me about where the passion for surfing come from.
Well, I felt that... So there's actually a few different reasons for why I believe in my journey that I ended up being obsessed with sports. And one was that I had some health complications, and I don't even really know what started it. But when I was about 6, I ended up on a series of antibiotics for 18 months, which completely ruined my internal system. And then I had to be on all these different types of diets, and I just was sick a lot and didn't feel that good. And then that, with a lot of the stress and the depression and the confusion that I was going through, because my brother had been diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, and my parents had been under a lot of stress and emotional stress and physical stress because of that. So I also had emotional turmoil on top of the physical. Yeah. So I gravitated to any type of activity, sport, as fast as I could, because I found quite quickly that moving my body was counteracting that intense stress. Yeah. So even as young as, I remember being in primary school, and I would run to school every day and run home, and I would swim 1 kilometre in the morning, and I was always just trying to find a way to move my body. So I kind of accidentally got really, really fit and really, really strong, and I got hooked on the endorphins that you get from pushing yourself physically. So then that was never about wanting to be a champion. That was just to cope. But then when I discovered surfing, because I thought, wow, this is amazing. Surfing is such an incredible sport and so much fun, that I thought, oh, I can make a living. I can make a life from being physical and having that constant sense of endorphins and relief, but also I'm doing something that I absolutely love. And I was at that point in my life like extremely competitive and driven to really make something of my life, because my life hadn't felt that good. So I felt extra driven to make it good. Yeah.
There's something, I think even about the ocean, there's something therapeutic about it.
Oh,
and I had Warren Keelan, who's an absolute ocean buff, on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. And we spoke about the power that it holds, and it just, for a moment, you can get in there and you can be having the worst day or the worst week or the most stressful time. And because it's so powerful and so unforgiving, at any sort of given moment, it's just stepping in there. You kind of forget everything that's happening in your life, and it's just about being in the ocean and being present. Yeah. So I think in many ways it was probably really therapeutic for you as a kid too, going through all of that.
Oh,
just
definitely.
To escape, to feel like you're in a new world.
Oh, it was definitely an escapism. And yeah, that was just so cleansing and clearing and rejuvenating. So I know exactly what you mean.
It's amazing. So when you first started to compete sort of professionally in surfing, or actually just competing, what age was that?
I was 14 when I started. I actually started surfing when I was 14.
Okay.
And I started competing within 3 months.
So you were just a natural.
I just loved it, yeah. And maybe there was a bit of natural ability, but there was just more, I guess, passion. And I had a really great coach, Mick Williams, and he threw me into it. He just said, off you go, you can do it. And so I completely failed. My first event came last. But the thing was, it just fueled even more desire to keep going. And I'm kind of glad that I lost so much in the beginning, because it drove that hunger.
Definitely.
Whereas I've got a nearly 14-year-old now that is very, very gifted at surfing, but because he's so good at it, I think that there's not much drive.
Okay.
It's like it's the hunger's not there like it was. Sometimes when you get kicked down a lot in the beginning, you end up wanting to rise even higher.
It's kind of that resilience of a child, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I had that too. I remember running. I was a bit of a sprinter growing up, and I remember running one time at my dad's. It was like a yearly picnic thing they done for work, and I reckon I was probably 4 or 5. I can remember it clearly. These two twin girls ahead of me, and I just couldn't catch them, and it was driving me insane that I couldn't catch them no matter how hard I tried. And I remember leaving there and thinking, I need to get faster.
Yeah.
And then an obsession with running come, and like that took on a big part of my life and footy, but I understand exactly what you mean. And so as your passion developed and those years go on, you find yourself starting to win competition.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the way it kind of worked for me was I pushed all that passion into the small pool of the local area and did all the competitions, to the point where within, I'd say about a year and a half, my results started to be first, second, first, third, first. So I thought, I need to take it to a bigger pool now. So I need to go to like other places, and I travelled a little bit to WA and Queensland and where there was like bigger arenas of competition. Yeah. And then again, I just kept on losing at the beginning, and then I thought, great, I'm going to push harder again, and then I'd get to the top of that. And so every time I got to the top of whatever pool I was in, I wanted the bigger pool.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, you know, I've watched some people and they want to be the big fish in a small pool.
Yeah.
But they don't get anywhere that way. And I always wanted to be I didn't mind necessarily being a small fish in a big pool. Like I kind of liked that excitement of where I could grow.
It's kind of similar to that I was saying, you know, different context, but if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's that consistent drive to want to be better and to improve. And I think that's going to say a lot later in your story for your resilience, I think, too. But talk to me about I can imagine you're still competitively pushing yourself within surfing at like 16, 17.
Oh, definitely. All the way through.
And how's the focus at this point? Is it 100% surfing, or are you still focused at school, or?
It was 150% surfing.
Okay.
And my parents were very strict with study, so it was a matter of, right, focus on the study, get it out of the way so that I could surf.
Okay.
So yeah, I did what I had to do to keep everyone happy so that I could get on with what I was doing.
And talk to me about crunch time, because any young athlete knows you sort of get to that point in time where if it's not happening, it gets harder for it to happen, and it gets harder to break that pro circuit. So where did you find yourself where you had to then make a decision, this is either going to happen as a full-time career or not?
Oh, I feel like that happened automatically straight away for me. Like when I was by the time I was 16, I'd already committed mentally in my head that that's what I wanted for my life. So I was just the mindset of, I'm going to give everything I've got and I won't stop until I get it. So there wasn't really a specific crunch time moment for me. It was more just, I'm committed and that's it. I'm not taking no for an answer. That's what I'm doing. Yeah. And
so talk to me about, you at one point decided then to make your journey overseas and explore. What sort of created that emphasis on wanting to leave Australia and explore something new?
Yeah, so that was actually when my surfing career fell apart, and that it crumbled, and I realised that I couldn't actually keep going with it because I was so full on and determined. It actually worked against me. I was a bit of a perfectionist, and I actually developed chronic fatigue. So when I was on the World Qualifying Series in the last year, when I was 21, I'd been all around the world to Hawaii and to California and Samoa and Bali and Europe and America. There was so many trips, and I'd given it all that. So when I got to Hawaii, it was a make or break competition for me. So I had enough points that if I did really well in this final event, I was actually going to make the top 16 in the world. And get onto the CT. So that's how close I was. And it was a 6-star event, and that means that you get the most, because back then there wasn't 10-star events, which there is now. But that was the highest ranked event with the most points. So even if I only got through a few rounds, I actually would have made that top 16. But when I got to Hawaii, they said I wasn't in the comp. And I'd filled out the forms, sent them off, got the confirmation like every other event through the year. But this particular event, looking back now, they wouldn't explain it to me, but now I think I'm guessing what I think has happened. And that is that they've had a whole bunch of local Hawaiians that wanted to be in the event, and they've gone, look, we'll throw them in, and we'll put you on reserve. Because that's what they told me. I was just on the reserve. And that day I didn't get into that event. So I'd spent my whole year paying for all the money and the events and the training and all the competitions, and then also spent my money on accommodation and the entry. I didn't even get a refund. And to not be actually able to compete broke my spirit.
100%.
Broke my heart. Shattered my world.
Especially when you're so close, you're within reach.
Yeah. And I knew that, other people was like, oh, well, you can give it a go next year. But I couldn't, because I was exhausted and I was heartbroken, and I just didn't have enough to like pick myself back up. So for about a week, I don't think I kind of like moved out of bed. I lost the will to surf. I lost the will to live. I just kind of didn't know. I was in shock. Yeah. And that time in Hawaii, I was really blessed because I ended up making friends with really, really good people, a whole circle of us. We hung out every day, and I spent 3 months with them there. And we just explored the islands. It's a very spiritual and magical place.
It's a beautiful place, isn't it? I've been blessed to go there twice. It's incredible.
Oh, so you know all about it, yeah. And it moved me. And these people that lived there that I spent time with, it moved me. And I started to realise that my life was very, very out of balance anyway. And all the pain from my childhood and my teenage years the confusion and the depression and the big questions to life, like what does life mean? What is the purpose of all of these suicidal tendencies? It started to bubble up, and I started to realize that surfing had actually been a coping mechanism, but also something, yes, it was amazing and I don't regret it, but it definitely was something that put a lid on all of that.
Kind of masked it.
And that was starting to bubble up. And I realized, maybe not consciously at the time, but it was starting to unravel that I needed to change.
Yeah.
And one of the first ways that I realized that I needed to change was that I'd been avoiding relationships, friendships, intimacy, and I don't mean intimacy sexually. I just mean like actual genuine connection and relating with people and being close to people. I was so afraid of being close to people because I was afraid that they would see my pain. I was ashamed of my pain. I was ashamed of who I was, and I realized that all that was I was broken. And so Hawaii for me was like a time when I decided that I was going to quit surfing altogether, and I was going to choose to go down a spiritual path to look for what was like, to look for deeper understanding into why I was broken, but more importantly, to look for what could be done about becoming whole and becoming healthy and well and a full person again, like a healed person. So I, in Hawaii, I dabbled in a couple of workshops with some Buddhists, and I also did my Reiki Masters in Hawaii as well, because I wanted to explore some energy and some alternative methods. And then when I came home, I did a Vipassana meditation retreat at Blackheath in the Blue Mountains, which is a 10-day no speaking meditation for 10 hours a day.
I've heard so much about these events,
I don't like it. It was too much. I wouldn't want to do it again.
It would be intense, especially as someone who is a conversationalist. I can't go a day without speaking to probably 10 people.
Yeah.
Let alone 10 days without speaking to a person at all.
Well, back then for me, I wanted to be alone, and even then for me it was hard. So if you're a conversationalist, you'd want to just run.
Have you ever heard of Aubrey Marcus?
No.
Aubrey's an incredible podcast host from Texas, and he done a 14-day silent retreat. I think it was somewhere like Switzerland, and it was silent and darkness retreat. Oh. So you sit in a dark room for 7 days and literally don't see or speak to anyone. And I remember listening to that and thinking, how intense. So you've come and you've done that event, and how did that feel at the time? Was it what you felt you needed then?
It definitely was, yeah. I needed to do it, and I got a lot out of it, and I don't need to do it again. But yeah, it was wonderful at the time to realize the power of meditation, and to also realize that what was going on a physical, spiritual, emotional, and mental level is fluctuating all the time. And so nothing is fixed. If you know, I for a long time when I was younger, I thought, well, I'm depressed, I'm broken, something's wrong with me, but that's it. It was like I'm stuck with that. I felt powerless and a victim to that. But the meditation retreat definitely showed me that that's actually I'm empowered, and that there are options. There are tools out there where you can actually use them to become empowered to change your state and frequency. So I was just at that point, I was quite young still, and it was only just the beginning. I was just touching on it.
How old were you at this point?
21.
Okay.
Yeah.
And throughout that process of coming from being in that depression and that loneliness and feeling like you couldn't escape it, to sort of starting to experience these new practices of spirituality, was it more so just the practices, or were there actual people or figures within that time that allowed you to feel more comfortable sharing with, opening up to, or was it more so just the practice itself?
For me, it was more so the practices and the books that I was reading. I was reading alternative texts and books, and a lot of it I kept very secret and very private, because now we live in a very new age time where it's almost hip to talk about meditation and yoga and spirituality. But back then, I didn't hear many people talking about it, and for me, and this is just me, my experience, it felt almost a bit scary to talk about it.
Okay.
A little bit like I was weird, and I wanted to keep it private.
Yeah.
So I just kind of dabbled myself privately and just did all the practices and read all the books, and didn't really share that with anybody for a long time.
You're right. It's definitely changed, hasn't it? I think even the conversation around mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we spoke about it in a few of the podcast episodes that I've had. It feels like, I don't think we're there yet, where it's not taboo at all, or people feel very comfortable. But I definitely feel, even presently, I don't know if it's with age for me, but the last couple of years, me and my mates talk about this stuff very consistently. We're all not shy to check in. I think it's becoming more consistent, which is amazing for our society, and especially for the young people growing up now. They feel more comfortable to open up about it.
Yeah,
but I think
absolutely.
these practices are becoming more common too.
They are, yeah. It's much more easy to say, hey, have you tried this technique? Or, hey, have you tried that technique? Or, have you heard of that person?
Definitely.
And, yeah, it's more free-flowing now. Yeah.
Definitely. So talk to me about you've had that retreat and you're starting to explore these practices. What then inspired you to then go to the next stage, which was travelling to practice in India?
Well, because I tried psychologists, counsellors, and everything that I could see at the time our Western culture had to offer, and they were leaving me very, very short of feeling any change whatsoever and any outcome, I thought I'll explore the Eastern philosophy. So in dabbling in some of the courses that I'd already done over here, I'd met some people that had been over there, and it was just a thought that popped into my head. Like, I guess India is where it's at for gurus, ashrams, yoga, meditation.
Yeah.
So, and the Dalai Lama was one of the big names back then that, you didn't really hear. We didn't have, internet was very, very small. It's not like it is now. And so I didn't hear about a lot of people. So the Dalai Lama, I guess, was the one and only figure I think that stood out for me. And I thought, oh, well, he's running courses and he's at his hometown at that time, that I jumped on it. I thought, sweet, I'll sign up for his course, and off I went. Yeah.
Wow. You're a very wise man too, so I can imagine the attraction to go and to learn under him.
Yeah.
And to hear all of that knowledge. But you got a lot of warnings, didn't you, before leaving about the danger? And I think even now, I know with my grandparents, if I say I'm going to Queensland, they're like, watch out, I heard that there was, something going on in Queensland and you got to be careful. It's typically I guess an older thing, that travelling was more foreign back then than it is now. But even so now, there's still those worries, and it's new territory. A lot of people haven't explored it. They're not comfortable with whether it's safe or not. But you had a lot of warnings from family and friends, didn't you, about...
I did have a few. Not a lot, but definitely enough serious ones, like people with genuine concern that had actually shown considerable worry. So, yeah, that... but I was so fearless. And to be honest, I'm still very fearless.
That's amazing to hear. That's amazing to hear, because it's a really nice trait to have, where you don't doubt yourself, you trust in people, I think. And that's got to be hard after a lot of people hear what you went through. But talk to me about booking everything to head over there and getting there. What you land in India, and what are the decisions that you're making at the time?
I hadn't booked anything except for the course with the Dalai Lama. That was the only thing I'd booked, and my ticket to get there, obviously, on the plane.
Yeah.
And I was so used to travelling, so I always wing things. Like, it's just, I like to be, I guess, I don't know what you'd call it, but a bit of a gypsy or a nomad, just someone that... Spontaneous. Yeah, and so many of my travels had been like that. Like, you could book a hotel at any moment, you could jump on a bus at any moment, you could go wherever. Like, I'd never had any problems travelling anywhere. And, yeah, India was just so different for me. As soon as I got there, I tried to go to a proper government tourist agency, which I was told to make sure you go to a proper legal government tourist agency. So that's what I looked for. and I had my Lonely Planet, and I knew exactly which bus that I had to get on to get to where I was going. So like I knew in my head exactly what I needed to do, and I was dead, like I was always, and I still am, someone that's dead set on doing it my way, the way that I need to do it. But when I went to this tourist agency, they were liars. They were scamming, and they were not a government tourist agency, even though it actually said on the door government tourist agency.
Okay.
And it was just a big scam.
So tell me, whereabouts in India were you at this point?
So this was in Delhi.
Okay.
Flown into Delhi, yeah.
Okay. So which back then, was it common to travel there? Like, was that the common place in India for travellers, or?
Well, that's one of the major airports,
Yeah.
and one of the major cities, and I felt like it was a common place to land. And one of the girls that I'd spoken to leading up to my trip, that she'd just come back from India, I sort of followed her lead. She said, I just flew to Delhi and went from there.
So when you're then booking that transport, are you booking transport to go directly to this course?
Yeah, directly on the bus straight to Dharamsala, which is like where the course was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so at what point did you realise that you'd maybe made the wrong decision with this company? That something's not right?
I hadn't realised that until later, of like when I was in Kashmir. So when I was with there was two men, young men, that were handling me. That's a good word, actually, handling me, when I was in their office. And they were so charming. Come on in, sit down, relax, let me make you a chai. Would you like a cigarette? Can I get you something to eat? Put your feet up. You look like you've had a hard day. What can we do for you? And it was very, I felt, I didn't realise, but I was being very, very played. And then, so...
Did it feel genuine, or did it feel... Because, when you travel, you want to immerse yourself in the culture. So if someone's nice and they're going out of their way, you want to feel like it's, maybe this is the way here. Maybe this is the way that people treat us. They're excited to have us here. Was that the feeling, or did you feel it was a bit deceptive, or maybe not genuine?
I, at first, felt like, I'm open to a different culture. I'm expecting a different culture. I'm expecting different formalities. And so I was like, I'm having a new experience. Like, I didn't think anything bad of it. But so what happened is, over several hours, and it went on for quite a few hours, I was attempting to get my ticket booked on this bus.
Yeah.
And every time I tried to get all I wanted was to get that ticket, they would derail me with something like, just relax. Don't worry about it. Just take some time to chill. And then I'd be like, well, I've chilled enough now. Like, can I just get that ticket sorted? Well, why don't you just have a look at this map and have a look at this pretty place and have a look at this here. And it's like, no, I this is what I want to do. I want to go to here, blah, blah, blah. No. You should do this and this. You can't miss out on this and this. And I was like, no, I'm not a tourist. I'm here for a spiritual journey. Yeah. I'm here to study. Anyway, it just went on and on and on. And I got worn down. I got tired and I got over it. And I thought all I wanted to do was get out of Delhi, because it had just already been a nightmare leading up to that point. And in the book, I go into a bit more detail about some of the things that happened before I got to that point that had added to this tired and run down feeling that I had. And in the end, he's like, look, I just think you should catch this plane here and catch this bus from this spot to Dharamsala, because it's going to be safer, it's going to be quicker, it's going to be more pretty. And they were putting fear into me at that point. Now, when he started to put the fear into me and started to really push what I wanted away and push for what he wanted, then I started to feel like this is really not normal. Like, I've traveled a lot and I know there's different cultures, but I don't care what culture you are. Like, this kind of feeling that I was having at that moment was like, this is just not even treating me very right. Like, this is not sitting well. So, I really felt like he pushed hard on that it's not safe. this bus I wanted to go on was not safe and that I should go this way because it's safer for a woman. So in the end, I just said, fine. I was so over it. I said, look, I'll just do it that way. I'm still going to get to the Dalai Lama and
still the desired destination.
And I'm just going to go, I'm just going to be flexible just so I can get, like, to be honest, it's interesting because I was so tired. All I wanted to do was get on that. He was like, oh, it's 14 hours. You sure you want 14 hours? I was thinking, yes, because I can close my eyes and sleep for 14 hours.
Yeah.
And when he was like, this flight here and then this and that, and I was like, oh, but that sounds like so
disjointed.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to get more than an hour's sleep at a time, and I was like, oh, that's not at all what I want to do. But I gave in because I just didn't know what else to do at that point.
So you've caught a flight, and is this like a commercial plane or is it?
So it's a small commercial plane from Delhi airport to, like a domestic plane, to Srinagar.
Okay.
Yeah, in
how long was that flight?
I think it was an hour and 20 maybe. Okay. It wasn't very long. Yeah.
Okay, so it's probably similar like going from Wollongong to the Gold Coast, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, and from there was a bus that was it arranged to pick you up, or was it just a bus that you jump on?
So the entire family was in on the scam, and the young man, I say boy because he was quite small, but he's a young man. He was a young man, and so the one that sent me on this plane, he had his brother pick me up.
Okay.
And his brother was the main perpetrator when I was held captive on this boat for 2 months. So he was the one that picked me up in his car. Okay. And then it was. I didn't realise that it was over at that point, but that was it. I was in dangerous territory at that point.
And so you're picked up by this gentleman. What's his persona like at first? Is it uncomfortable?
It was very similar to... It was like an older version of the same guy in Delhi in the tourist agency. So it was like hospitable, welcoming, charming, and like a little bit charismatic, but also very pushy and very kind of like, well, I'm here to look after you, but it was more like, it didn't get it was the same kind of feeling of, but I don't really feel like you're giving me like helping me with what I want. You're helping me with what you want for me. So it was like, oh, well, this is not what I want, you know.
And usually when that happens overseas, you just think it's about making money, like they just want an extra fare, like, you know what I mean? And you get to the point where you're so over it, like you said, you just want to get there. So you're like, all right, like whatever, if I've got to pay a little bit extra or whatever it is, I'll get there. So then you've obviously been taken somewhere. Have they taken you straight to the boat where you were held captive?
We were headed straight for the boat, yeah. So we had to make a stop to get money out. And that was when I knew something really bad was happening, because so Rafig was the older brother's name. He was standing. So when we stopped to get some money out, I needed to have some cash so that I could spend if I wanted to buy something. But he was standing in between me and the ATM, and he was like literally arguing with me, saying that I'm a female and this is Kashmir and this is a Muslim state and women are not allowed to be out alone. Women are not allowed to go to the bank. Women are not allowed to do anything in this state. Men have to do everything for you in this state. And he literally stood in between me and the ATM and he said, you will not be allowed to do this. And I was like, well, it's just there. No, like, I'm a tourist. Aren't tourists supposed to be coming here to
spend money?
Yeah, like, what am I supposed to do? He's like, you're supposed to give your card to me and I'm supposed to do it for you. That's the way. That's the custom here. Okay. So, again, there's that argument of wearing me down, and I thought, well, at this point, I'm in Kashmir, and he's just told me it's a Muslim-dominated state, and that women, and there was no tourists around, and there was no one that spoke English around, and I didn't know where I was, and I'm more tired at this point. Yeah. And I'm getting so over it, and worn down. And I just thought, well, you know, maybe it was lack of judgment. I couldn't think of another option. So I went, fine, here's my card and here's my PIN number and you get me the money out for me. So he doesn't go to the ATM. He walks into the bank. He says, wait here, which actually I only just realized recently was quite ironic, because in one moment he's saying women aren't allowed to be alone. Women have to have a man with them. But here he is leaving me alone to go into the bank by himself, which is a contradiction to what he was saying. So off he goes. 20 minutes later, he comes back, doesn't give me my money, doesn't give me my card, refuses to. And he says, I'll take care of it for you. And I found out that he'd taken all of the money from all my bank accounts.
Okay.
The whole lot.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I can imagine you're quite intimidated. Like, this is quite scary, and especially to be in a foreign country where you can't communicate with anyone. There's no one around that.
There was no mobile phones really back then either. It wasn't like that.
And so then you're back in this car and you're travelling towards this boat.
Yeah.
And at what point does it become... Is there any thought in your head that I need to get away somehow here?
To be honest, I was so naive that I actually thought... I had no idea he'd taken all my money. And I was telling myself, oh, I'm sure he's going to just... I'm sure he's actually doing the right thing by me. I'm sure he is just taking care of my money. I'm sure that he'll give me my bank card back. I'm sure that this will work out. I'm sure that I'll get on that bus. I'm sure I'll be fine. Like, I think I was telling myself that as a coping mechanism to just,
okay.
Like, to not completely freak out, because I didn't have any other option. I couldn't think of where to run. I couldn't think of what to do. I couldn't, I think I was also hoping. It was like, oh, please let this just be okay. Let this just be some weird custom that, like, passes and I'll be off. And
the thing is, you also think that you've heard of these things going wrong before, but never happens to you, right? That's the thing. Like, this is something that you hear about in the movies or you read about in a book. Yeah. Not something that actually happens to you or something that you experience.
Yeah.
So talk to me about reaching that boat. What's your thoughts in that moment, and what happens from there? So
I was told that I was to spend 2 nights on the boat because the bus wasn't going to be available until whatever day it was. Like, if it was Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember now, but whatever day it was, the apparent shortcut was going to be the bus. Was going to be the flight, the 2 nights on his brother's boat. His brother was going to take care of me, and then it was going to be the bus to Dharamsala. Okay. So I knew it wasn't like unexpected when I got onto the boat. It was like, well, I know that this is an interim 2-night stay.
Okay.
And to be honest, I was thinking, great, I can sleep. I can just sleep and then make the most of, like, just the moment to, I don't know, just sit around, whatever, have a look at what's going on there, look at it like now I've been to Kashmir. Yeah. Another tick on the list of where I've been and what I've done. I was always looking for the best in every situation, like that was kind of just my general mindset too, like to try and make the most of life. And so I was looking from that perspective of, how can I make the most of this? Forgot your question.
So you're obviously an optimist at nature, especially through your practice. When you start to feel more comfortable with dealing with your emotions and you're trying to be positive and optimistic about every opportunity that presents itself, you get to this point now where you're in this boat, and I can imagine you, like you said, you're tired and you're ready just to rest. Was it immediate that the mood and everything changed, or did it take time over the course of that 2 days?
So as soon as he took the money from me, I saw the side of him that was really, like, kind of like, I was scared. Let me just put it like that. Like, I felt a bit scared by his nature at that point, and so that just slowly, I just saw more and more of that. really quickly. And yeah, like, and I felt like it was okay though, because I felt like, well, I'll get off this boat and it'll all be in the past.
Yeah.
Like this is an interim stop, so who cares what he's like? Like, as long as I get my money back and get onto that bus, then like I don't care, you know.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm moving on. So yeah, like it was pretty hostile and uncomfortable pretty quickly, and it just kind of got worse and worse pretty quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously then this is where this part of the story, which is quite emotionally terrifying and also is going to play, I guess, is really going to toy with your mental state and your physical state throughout this time. So when did it actually start that the abuse began?
On the first night, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. The first night after dinner, he wanted to show me the lake at night on a boat. So it's a houseboat that's, just to paint a picture, it's a really, really big lake, and then there's a really small, like a village type island it's really, really quite, like there's nothing there really at all, and then there's just a few houseboats that's sort of connected, like fixed on the edge of this little island. But then basically to get anywhere, you either have to catch a speedboat or they have these long wooden shikara boats.
Okay.
And they usually fit, well, there's bigger ones and there's smaller ones, and they usually fit like two to sort of 6 people in them.
Yeah.
And they just row them slowly across the lake. So I just wanted to get to bed and have a rest, but he insisted, again, very, very insisting and very dominating. He was like, I just want to show you the lake at night, how beautiful it is. So he waited to do this until when everyone was asleep.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, fine, I'll just quickly have a look at the lake, shut him up, and then because I couldn't get rid of him.
Yeah.
And so I went on the lake, and then it was in the boat that he started to put the hands up my skirt, the hands in my top, the hands like kissing my face and trying to tell me that, trying to get it on with me. Yeah. And I managed to get him off, and I think it was because I actually made quite a lot of noise. And I think he was like, oh, well, I don't want anyone to like see what's going on here. Yeah. So we went back, and then he just followed me. He wouldn't let me go to bed, and he just kept following me until he ended up forcing himself on me in one of the front rooms where no one was. And then he followed me into my bed, and that was he raped me on the first night.
Far out. So I can't even imagine what's going on, because it's so, you're not even close to home. That situation is hard enough and terrifying enough when you're in comfortable surrounds, but you're in another country, you have no way of contacting any of your family, friends, or your support network. This is happening. How do you cope with that?
Oh, because I was on this, as I explained before, I was already feeling so depressed and so down and so desperate for answers, and I was just focused on, like, I just need help. I've got to get to this Dalai Lama, and I've got to learn this stuff, because I felt like I was going to end up wanting to die if I didn't find the answer. Excuse me. Sadly, I actually felt like, oh well, what does it matter anyway? Because I'm already in a really dark place, and once I'll either get to the Dalai Lama and I'll figure it all off. I'm here in India to find the answers to life, and I'll figure it all out and I'll heal anyway, or I won't and I'll die anyway. Like, it was kind of like I was in that darker place that it was like, well, it's all right. I'll get on that bus and I'll just leave it in the past. It'll be fine. Like, I'll just get over it. Like, I just felt so screwed up anyway.
At this point, you're on the boat, and you said that there were others on the boat too?
His family, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you can't even say anything to anyone, because no one's going to believe what you say when it's their son or, you know, their brother or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had actually also heard at some point that in some countries, that in some places and cultures, that the woman can be the one that can be blamed for the act as well, the act of rape. So I actually remember trying to talk to the dad to see if I could get help from the dad to escape. But I remember being so frightened of what I was saying. So I didn't want to say this has happened because I was I was afraid that he would then blame me. So I said, his son's trying to do this.
Okay. And is that custom because it is, especially an Islamic state or a Muslim state, that I know there's been talk before in some of those countries that you're revealing too much and it's suggestive. Is that what the line of thinking that you're going through? Is that they're going to blame this on me because I'm not culturally dressed or I'm not culturally appropriate?
Yeah, I think that I was just thinking that was a possibility. I didn't know for sure, but it was definitely a thought process that I had where I was aware that, well, this is a culture I don't understand. This is a culture I haven't done my research on. I didn't expect to be in Srinagar and Kashmir. That's not part of where I was headed. I was well aware that Hindus were... I didn't really know much about their religion or their culture, and you know, I don't want to make this about a cultural thing at all, but all I had in my mind was that I was going to the Dalai Lama and they were Buddhist and Hindu, more Hindu based, and all I knew was that from what I'd looked into, that they were very like kind, loving, gentle people.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I ended up in Kashmir, and then I found out that Rafiq had like put the heavy on me so quickly and started brainwashing me really heavily that I was in danger, that this was an unsafe place for females, that I actually did start to think in my head, well, maybe this is the kind of place where if I say that this has happened to me, it'll be my fault because I'm a woman and because I've dressed a certain way or I've done a certain thing or just because I'm a woman.
And that's a terrible feeling because, you know, we all know, I think the beauty and the blessing of living in 2020 is that we've experienced these cultures more, and we all know beautiful people from these cultures. You know, I have amazing Muslim friends, I know Buddhist friends, I don't necessarily know anyone who's studies Hinduism or that form of religion, but we know beautiful people from all of these religious backgrounds and beliefs. But unfortunately, in any walk of life, there are the bad ones.
That's
and the
right.
ones that look to take advantage or manipulate the teachings or the understandings of that religion to suit their own agenda. And that's obviously what's happening in this case. And so obviously that's night one. We're talking about 2 months of being in this position. And is this consistently happening?
I'd lost count of how long it all just blurred into one big mess, and I checked out, like I wasn't in my body. I created an entire fantasy where I was living out there somewhere. Like I blacked it out.
It's like almost a form of escapism.
Yeah.
To cope.
Yeah. I did a lot of chanting and prayer, like repetitive prayer, and a lot of meditation, so I could just bypass it.
So at no point in this 2 months have you left that boat? Are you on that boat for the whole 2 months?
So I went off the boat, but only with Rafiq or his dad. And like I said, because I found out that his dad was like kind of, they were all in on it. They all knew what was going on.
Okay.
And so, I only really worked that out afterwards. But, so I was taken with them places.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a prisoner of the family, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anywhere we went, there was never any other tourists. I never saw other tourists where we went, and Well, that's actually not true. Sorry, we went hiking in the Himalayas. It's really difficult to remember everything because I do block a lot of it out. Like when you've gone through a trauma,
Of course.
I really have to, for my own sake, put a lot of it away.
Bury
That's
it
why I
a
wanted
little
to
bit.
write the book, because then I've got everything out. And if people say, oh, but this and that, and I go, yeah, but that's because I put it away and I've forgotten.
Yeah.
So like just now I just remembered, there was a point where there was a couple of non-English speaking tourists, but they were from Europe somewhere, and they joined us on a hike in the Himalayas that Rafi had forced me to go on with him. And that was really great for one reason, was that while they were around, he couldn't rape me. So I was feeling happy that at least I didn't really feel comfortable to say anything to them because I didn't know if they'd understand, and I was scared that
it would get back to him. Or...
Yeah. But but that was the only time I saw tourists. The rest of the time when we went out, it was to pick up supplies for something, or to a village market or something to get something, or to try and force me to buy something, which was just insane. But so there was never anywhere for me to go. Like I was always looking. I was always thinking, well, okay, could I run here? Could I do that? Could I speak to that person? But there just wasn't anywhere to go.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wasn't going to trust the police, but I never saw like where there was police stations, but even if I did, I still don't know if I would have felt comfortable or confident enough to actually go into the police, because Rafik seemed to know everyone, seemed to be like close to everyone, and I felt my intuition was right. I found out that they did bribe the police, and that I had that strong intuition that if I went to speak to the police, that they were just going to bribe them anyway.
Yeah, that's a question I had, because you don't understand in these cultures who holds significant presence within that community, and who is actually respected, who is not, and you don't know whether you're speaking to the right people at the right time about the situation you're in, or whether that's going to make your situation worse. That's what's so scary about it. But if I believe and if I understand correctly, you could call it somewhat of a miracle that you were found.
I think it was an absolute act of God. You call it whatever power you want. I like God, but you can call it universal energy or Allah, whatever you want. But I mean, for me, it's God. It was an act of God.
And it was a friend's intuition that...
It was her dream. She had a dream.
Explain that to me.
So Kat told me that she woke up in the middle of the night from having a really intense dream that I was in danger and that I needed help and that something was really wrong. And that she woke up and trusted her intuition about that dream, like that wasn't just a dream, that there was actually something